Shalom and welcome to another Petachamo podcast from Be'abadan, teaching Noahide Judaism of Messianic Hebrews. It is Sunday, the 18th of May, 2025. Shavua Tov to everybody. Hope you have a very blessed and holy week and you had a good Sabbath last night. And I hope that you have all done your Havdalah. Havdalah is the minimum that you have to do for observing the Sabbath. It means that you're acknowledging the existence of the Sabbath without actually having observed anything more than that, and you've honored the Sabbath as a reality. And if you want to go beyond that, then of course you build up from the Havdalah onwards. And we always encourage people to keep the Sabbath on this channel and to do Havdalah. Now you'll say, why? Because Noahides are not required to keep the Sabbath. There are people from all sorts of religions around the world, and they're not all necessarily having to keep the Sabbath. Only the 7 laws of Noah. The Sabbath is not one of the 7 laws of Noah. And that's correct if the Noahide has never broken any of the covenant of Noah, any of the 7 laws. If they've kept the Sheva mitzvot all of their lives, then there is no sin upon them. They have nothing to fear, and their account is with God, and all should be well. All should be well. If, however, a Noahide has broken one of the 7 laws of Noah, and they have fallen out of the covenant, then it is necessary for them to find some solution to that, and in order to be restored to the good graces with Hashem. And that is why we encourage people on this channel to follow the 10 Commandments. That is to believe in the revelation of Mount Sinai, which is what we say in Judaism guarantees a Noahide a place in the world to come, even if they have fallen short. So it's kind of a salvation through faith and works, not just through works alone. If you're keeping the laws, then it's a works alone salvation, and you will get it if you do the works. But if you have fallen short, then you need salvation through faith and works. And so this is the Judaic version of that. The work should be to your utmost, doing the best you can, but the faith is what saves you. And you can't say that you have faith if you're not doing the works. The works are the proof of faith. They are the fruits of faith. And anybody who says that they have saved by faith without any works, then they are lying, deceiving, wicked people, and you shouldn't go anywhere near them. Okay, so now today we're going to be talking about the intersex for Noahides, intersex Noahides. We're going to be talking about the intersex situation. So there are as many intersex people on the planet as there are in the population, apparently, as there are red-headed people. That doesn't mean that all red-headed people are intersex. It just means as often as you'll see a red-headed person in Europe, I don't know if this is the case across the planet, but at least in European and people of European descent, as often as you see somebody who has got red hair, that is as often as there are people out there who are also intersex. So they're not non-existent. They do exist. And the old name for them, or the old term which was used for them in much of the older literature and scientific literature was hermaphrodite. And suddenly this word is not being used anymore. And I think that's a major reason why people are confused by the concept of intersex. They don't know what does it mean, what's going on. Because when you change a terminology, it can make something seem new and unusual and have no precedent, and that makes people afraid. And so you've got a lot of people who become very afraid of this new word. They don't know what it means. But the reason why the term was changed because the term hermaphrodite was seen as derogatory by many people of the intersex community, so they didn't want to continue to use this. And that's not everybody, by the way. Not everybody in the intersex community is like that. It's just that was the super sort of tiptoe approach, was let's use a new word, then nobody's going to be offended, and it's fine for everybody. People who are comfortable with the term hermaphrodite are also comfortable with the term intersex, and those people who are not comfortable with the term hermaphrodite are comfortable with the term intersex. So that's where this term comes from. Now, I'm going to be talking about this situation in the Noahide Judaism, Noahide faith. First of all, Noahide Judaism is, of course, based on the Bible and the Oral Torah. The Oral Torah, we believe, was revealed at Mount Sinai as well. And the Oral Torah, we have actually got at least 6 kinds of sexual gender described. We have the androgynous, the Eilonit, we have an Ish, Isha, Saris. We've also got Saris Chama and Saris Adam. We have a Tumtum as well. So we've got all these different terms, and Tumtum basically covers everything else. So you've got a lot of different cases in the Talmud, and I'm going to be also, so I'm not going to go into different cases in the Talmud because it simply is mentioned here for you to understand that it's covered. We do acknowledge that there is more than just two sexual genders. There is obviously male, obviously female, and everything in between. Okay, natural. And then we're going to also look at it. Mostly, we're going to look at the biblical concept, biblical terms. So, biblical phrases. I think what we're probably going to start, probably a good place to start would be Genesis, starting at the beginning. And these are passages which intersex believers should hold on to, because there's something in there possibly for you if you're intersex, which might have different interpretations generally, but they are passages which I think would be important for you to focus on. If you want to find something deeper, and if it also makes you feel like that there is nothing excluding you. There's nothing excluding you from the biblical context. So I'm going to have a look at some of these passages now and put them on the screen as we're talking about it. So first, I think, is Genesis. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, and that should be visible now. Yeah, it is there. So in Genesis chapter 1, it talks about the creation of the creation of everything in these 7 periods of time, these 7 yomim, which are the 7 days of creation. 7, I say days in such a strange way because I'm trying to emphasize that a yom in Hebrew culture is never just simply meant a 24-hour period. And the best way to kind of convey that to you is to talk about, in English, how we use the term day to refer to a long period of time. For example, we talk about the day of the dinosaurs. It means a long period of time, millions of years in which the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And when that came to an end, we could say the dinosaurs had their day. It's finished. And then we can also say that in my grandfather's day or my great-grandmother's day, and it means the period of time that they were living. So day can mean millions of years. It can mean a 24-hour period. It can mean a long period of time. There's no specific idea of how long a day is in Judaism or in Hebrew culture. And anybody who says otherwise, again, is lying to you. Keep away from them because they're really toxic people. All right, then. So let's carry on then. So it goes on to the 6th day, Genesis chapter 1. And Hashem is creating all the creatures in Yetzirah. This is actually the creation of Yetzirah, which is going on here. And then finally, he says, after he's created all the animals, he then says, let us make mankind, in our image, after our likeness, to rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock and over all the earth itself, and every creature that crawls upon it. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Which can mean, of course, he created male and female. But there is a discussion on whether this actually means he has created the original image of mankind was hermaphrodite. That's the term which was used. Or if you want to use the modern term, then intersex. So the discussion is whether God actually created mankind intersex because God's image itself is intersex, i.e. hermaphrodite. There's lots of stuff discussing that in medieval alchemy and things like that, and the Adam Kadmon image. So to use the modern language and update it, the idea is perhaps the image of God itself is intersex, and therefore mankind, when he was created, was intersex. And that goes on also with the concept later, when God brings out of Adam, he extracts woman from Adam. That's in Genesis chapter 2. And he brings all the animals to the man to see what he would call them. And God formed every beast of the field. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 19. God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and he brought them to the man to see what he would name each one. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock and to the birds of the air and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he slept, he took one of the man's ribs and closed that up that area with flesh, and from the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made a woman and brought her to him. So he extracted woman from man. And that was the splitting of the original hermaphrodite or intersex being. I don't know what's the correct term for this, I suppose, because when you say hermaphrodite, it is a noun. But when you say intersex, I don't think it's a noun. I think it's an adjective. I don't know if the term intersex can actually be used as a noun. So because these are new terms. So I'll say intersex being. I'll use it as an adjective, just to be clear. So the idea is that from this intersex being, he extracted a woman. And so there was a clear distinction, therefore, between man and woman at that point. But the original condition was intersex. Therefore, it's natural that every now and then intersex children are born in the original image of Adam Kadmon beforehand, or the original image of God, I should say, beforehand, which is the original image in which mankind was created. Okay. So we've covered the Genesis situation. That's the first one. Should be feeling quite happy about that and comfortable with that if you are of the intersex community, that there is that solid discussion going on there, which has actually brought into the conversation this. Now there's something else, quite an interesting one. We're going to look at Isaiah. So let's have a look at this tab. So in Isaiah chapter 56, verse 3, it uses the concept of eunuchs. Now, as you know, there are different kinds of eunuch. As I should probably actually go and have a look at a verse from the Gospel of Matthew first, actually, Matthew 19, verse 12, where Jesus is talking about eunuchs. It's in the context of teaching about divorce. So we'll probably have to look at the whole passage on divorce first and then have to go into that. But so it's in Gospel of Matthew chapter 19. It's also there in the Gospel of Mark chapter 10 as well. It's also there as well. And there's the general discussion on not divorcing. I'll have to explain that as well. So the discussion is basically that if a man and a woman have come together and have become one flesh, in other words, have conceived a child together, their DNA of both of them have become fused into one new being, that is a child, then they shouldn't get divorced. If they haven't had a child or conceived a child together, then they may be able to get divorced. But if they have been fused into one, if they've become a new being, if they've had a child, if they've conceived a child together, then they should not get divorced. And he goes into explain this here. He says, Jesus says, "Have you not read from the beginning that the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one." So again, it's a reference to the kind of the hermaphrodite condition or the intersex condition. "So they are no longer two but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, i.e., in a child, in a conceived child, let no one separate." Also, therefore, it's also you can interpret this and say, is he also making a comment here on intersex people, where the two have become one, and should they therefore be forced to have operations as children to be turned into male or turned into female to make their families happy and to fit in with society? And here the argument could be no. What God has joined together, let no one separate. It's got more than one meaning. There are multiple levels of meaning. You can take it at more than one level. So it has a level for heterosexual people, heterosexual couples and marriages, but it also has a meaning for intersex people as well. So there's a different meaning for both, but it's got the meaning which both can take out of it. It doesn't mean that one meaning is more correct than the other. Even if one meaning dominates and the other is less common, it doesn't mean that this doesn't have a significant meaning for intersex people to reflect on as well. And then it goes on and says, why then did they ask? They asked, did Moses order a man to give his wife a certificate of divorce? Beit Shammai, they say that you can divorce your wife for any reason. And this is the Beit Shammai that was confronting him in this matter. And Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because of your hardness of your hearts. But it was not this way from the beginning. Now I tell you that whomsoever divorces a wife, except for sexual immorality, or infidelity, actually, I think the phrase is, and marries another woman, commits adultery. Then his disciples said to him, "If this is the case between a man and his wife, it is better not to marry." And Jesus says, "Not everyone can accept this word," he replied, "but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born that way." So the phrase in the New Testament for intersex people is born eunuch. Born eunuch. People who are born that way. Others were made that way by men. Okay, so you could be made that way by an operation, by castration, or something like that. There could be something done to you which makes you this way. Okay, and others still just choose to live like eunuchs, which could be neither this nor that, for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. They choose to be neither male nor female for the kingdom of heaven. That's a very interesting point. And that means, in the context of biblical stories, is meaning an asexual lifestyle. You may have seen the phrases LGBTQ IA, and the A stands for asexual. So that would be actually these people who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And the one who can accept this should accept it. So there's a direct reference here to the idea of choosing to live like a eunuch, even though you're not a eunuch. And that's he makes it very clear that when he's using the Greek word for eunuch, he includes it to mean a kind of person who could be born neither male nor female. Okay, and so eunuch is Jesus's word for intersex. That's not just somebody who has been castrated or had an operation. Jesus is using it specifically to include, and first of all and foremost in his sentences, those who are born that way. And this is because he is aware, of course, of the oral Torah, where we have a big discussion of these intersex types, these different types of intersex there are. So Jesus is making a reference to them there. So that's helpful for us when we consider Isaiah. Isaiah goes on here to say something about the intersex, the eunuchs again. So that's in Isaiah chapter 56. And there are other passages as well, but this is quite a useful and important one to read. And it's going to be here under the salvation for foreigners, which is again for Noahides. So it's a Noahide concept. And it says, "And for this is what the Lord says to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths," the Sabbath-keeping eunuchs, "who choose what pleases me and hold fast to my covenant." As we say, of course, it doesn't matter what you're doing through the week. God is really only interested in about what you do on Sabbath. This religion of Abraham is the Sabbath religion. It is the religion of the Saturday worshippers, or the Saturday churchgoers, or the Saturday synagogue goers, whatever you want to call it. And that has been criticized by people who said, "Oh, you're so good on Saturdays, or if your Sabbath was a Sunday, you're so good on Sundays, but the rest of the week you're horrible." But God actually never made the requirement for you to be so wonderful throughout the rest of the week. He really only wanted you to be wonderful, at least for one day of the week, and keep holy the Sabbath day, to make a real Kodesh, holy Sabbath day, to make a distinction between Kodesh and Nachol, between the distinction between holy and common. Okay, secular, the holy and secular. He wants to make a clear distinction, and so this Sabbath is very important. And for those eunuchs or intersex who keep my Sabbaths, who choose what pleases me, and who hold fast to my covenant, I will give them in my house and within my walls a memorial and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. That's a nice promise, isn't it? It's lovely. I mean, who could be upset with that? That's a very, very nice thing. So let's go on then to another passage from Matthew. I mean, as I said, we can go to a lot of these passages. Let's go back and I'll just have a look and see a few more. There are a few more that you can actually see. If you use BibleHub.com, Matthew chapter 19, verse 12, you can see a few more where it makes reference to a few more other places. The indication seems to be that Paul himself was actually one of these born eunuchs. If you read through, it seems to indicate that Paul is actually one of them. So you should read through his letters and decide, especially Corinthians, whether Paul is actually saying he is one of these eunuchs, these born eunuchs, or was he made into a eunuch by other people because of a punishment? Was that taken out upon him, or did he just decide to live as a eunuch lifestyle in order to please the Lord? Not very clear which one, and I don't think it matters which one. The important thing is that this is an aspect that Hashem has spoken about. But it is a solitary life. It is meant to be it may be an intersex sort of identity, saying and we can go into more detail with that with Corinthians, for example, where he makes a very clear and interesting statement. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, he says, "There's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ." So maybe he's saying, we need to be asexual, and he's got an intersex sort of identity here, which allows him to come out and say that. So it could be the first historical record of somebody, coming out concerning their intersex identity. That's an interesting possibility, and I think it's worthwhile, promoting that for intersex people to think about, and not just intersex people, but also people who are not intersex as well. We need to recognize that there is a third sort of gender, if you like. There's male, there's female, and there's everything else in between. And the Bible seems to have covered that long, long time ago. Now, what went wrong with us that we had people like Donald Trump making a law that there are only two genders, male and female? What's going on here? Completely anti-biblical, and something is actually a disruption to the natural order of things. The Bible knew about this. How come, modern Christians don't? Well, the answer is because the modern Christians don't read their Bibles. I don't know what they're following, but they're certainly not following Noahide Judaism. That's following Messianic Noahide Judaism. They're not following neither the Old Testament nor are they following the New Testament. It's very clear that the Bible covers all of that. So that's worth considering there. So we've looked at Galatians as well. And now, so we've done Genesis, we've done Isaiah, we've done Matthew 19, we've done Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, and now we're going to go on to this one here. This is Matthew 22, verse 30, and it's a question concerning the Sadducees who were coming to him. The Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. They believe that you live and then you die and that's it. And they came and they asked a question to Jesus concerning the resurrection. They made a story about a man who died without having any children. And according to the law of Moses, Moses declared that if a man dies without having children, his brother is to marry the widow and raise up offspring for him. This is called the levirate marriage. Now, there were 7 brothers amongst us, they say. Don't know if this is true or not. This is just an example they're trying to give to try and trip up Jesus' logic and maybe find a reason to accuse him. And they say, the first of these brothers married and died without having children. So, under the laws of the levirate marriage, he left his wife to his brother, and his brother then, the same thing happened again to the second, and to the third, and to the fourth, all the way down to the 7th brother. Very unrealistic situation. And last of all, the woman died. So then, they say, in the resurrection, in the hereafter, whose wife will she be of the 7? For all of them were married to her. So they think they're being very clever. And Jesus answers, well, you are mistaken because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. In the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. Instead, they will be like the angels in heaven, which is a reference to that first passage we looked at in Genesis 1. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read that God said to you, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living. And so if we look on this one, this is Matthew chapter 22, verse 30. They will be like the angels in heaven. And we have other cross references here. With Mark, also it says, when the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. Instead, they will be like the angels in heaven, which can mean androgynous, or it could mean also asexual. Of course, marriage is irrelevant. And here we have an interesting passage from Luke as well. So let's read Luke's one in full. Slightly different from Mark. No, slightly different from Matthew, I should say. Fundamentally the same, but slightly different. So we'll read it again. And so the sons of this age, he says, Jesus answers, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to share in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. That's quite strong there. In fact, they can no longer die because they are like the angels. And since they are sons of the resurrection, they are sons of God. So he makes it again very clear that he's indicating that there's going to be no sex. It's not a thing about sex. Now, the kingdom of God, of course, is the Sabbath. Isaiah makes that clear, and he's saying the Sabbath is open to everybody. But in order to enjoy the Sabbath properly, you've got to become asexual people on the Sabbath. You've got to be asexual on the Sabbath. You're not interested in sex. That's what it means. Asexual means not interested in sex. Androgynous means not very clear whether you're male or female. But asexual means not interested in sex, just not interested. And that's what you're talking about here. So the Sabbath requires us to be not interested in sex. And if we are so addicted to sex that we can't enjoy the Sabbath because we can't spend one day of the week being not interested in sex, then we are in serious trouble. In other words, we are not going to be able to gain a place in the world to come. We are excluded from the Sabbath kingdom. We are excluded from the kingdom of the Son of Man, who is Lord of the Sabbath. And we are excluded from being able to say honestly and with truth in our hearts, we're excluded from honestly being able to confess Jesus as our Lord and Savior. You cannot do so honestly if you cannot be asexual for the Sabbath every week. And every Sabbath, of course, God's Sabbaths, not just once a week, but there are 7 extra Sabbaths throughout the year as well. So it's a very important thing, and they have to focus on that. All right, so those are the biblical passages. Now, I'm going to talk about something related to this, which is actually it's important for us to consider, to think about, okay? The first thing is that you might be under the impression that being male and female, if you are genetically, biologically male, then it's because you've got a Y chromosome. And if you're genetically, biologically female, it's because you don't have a Y chromosome. It's not exactly the case. It's not exactly true. It's generally true because the gene which makes you into a male is called the SRY gene. I'll repeat that. That's the S for sugar, R for Romeo, Y for Yankee gene, the SRY gene. And the SRY gene is the determinant of male development. It's the key determinant for male development. And it is normally located on the Y chromosome. But in certain cases, it can be misplaced onto an X chromosome, leading to individuals with an XX chromosome constitution. That means they have the 2 X chromosomes that most women have, but they exhibit male characteristics. And this is often due to a translocation event during the formation of the sperm cells. Often, but not always. So that's absolutely integral to understanding this situation. It's not about whether you've got a Y chromosome or not. It's about whether you have the SRY gene activated or not. And the SRY gene, the activated SRY gene, could be and is usually on the Y chromosome. Hence, people who have Y chromosomes generally, mostly, for the most part, normally look like men. And the people who don't have Y chromosomes normally, for the most part, don't look like men. But that is not always the case. That is not the rule that God dictated for his creation. The rule that he dictated for his creation was whether the SRY gene would be activated or not. And he doesn't really care too much about where the SRY gene is, generally on the Y chromosome, but I don't care if it's on the X chromosome either. God doesn't care. That's why it is the way it is. That's why it happens this way. So now that you know that the real gene for identifying somebody who is biologically male is the SRY gene, which could be on a person who has no Y chromosome, then you will understand how biological gender is really determined. This is important because there was a ruling recently in the High Court in the United Kingdom where they decided on a biological definition of male and female as being the legal definition for male and female with regards to this particular law, which was passed concerning discrimination. And most people jumped on that in their ignorance, assumed that that meant, oh, okay, the court has decided that if you have a Y chromosome, you're a man, and if you don't have a Y chromosome, you're not a man. Okay, but that is not what the court decision was about. It was basically saying a biological definition, and the biological definition has got nothing to do with the Y chromosome. It's a coincidence that most of the time it's on the Y chromosome, but it's actually, the biological definition is actually about the SRY gene. Go and research this. I'm not going to do it on this channel. Go and research the SRY gene and how it activates, and it's the key determinant for male development. And then you'll understand what the biological definition of a male is. So just because you have two X chromosomes and you don't have a Y chromosome, it does not mean that you are female. If you have the activated SRY gene, you will appear to be male in every single way. That's fascinating, isn't it? But that is the way that God designed his universe. Okay. Now that we know this, it's important to consider some things which are maybe even more difficult to come to terms with. First of all, that the Y chromosome is going extinct. This is a genetic fact. In fact, over the 180 million years that the Y chromosome has been in existence, it has already lost 97% of its ancestral genes. It is shrinking, it is deteriorating, it is fizzling out of existence. The Y chromosome is going extinct. God has already decreed this 180 million years ago, and as time goes by, the Y chromosome is going to be obliterated, eliminated, exterminated. It will go extinct. Does that mean that men will no longer exist? Well, no, because we just learned about the SRY gene, which activates and makes people look male. But what it does have serious implications for is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction as we know it will come to an end in a couple of million years' time. There's different estimates about how long exactly it will be, but we're already 97% of the Y. We're already at the point that 97% of the Y chromosome has already become extinct, and all we have left of this Y chromosome is literally 3% of what it used to be. Since it first came into existence, it has deteriorated into just 3% of what it used to be. This is a very important thing for you to think about, especially if you're a male. You're passing on your Y chromosome. You have to accept that in the future, your Y chromosome is no longer going to exist. Men, as you thought, with Y chromosome will no longer exist. That is the way it is going. There is nothing you can do about it because the gene, the Y chromosome gene, the chromosome itself, is weak and unstable. It's breaking apart. It's falling to pieces. That's quite an interesting thing to consider. So unless there is an alternative sex chromosome developed which works, and it's going to be only done by genetic scientists, okay, then there will be no more Y chromosome males left in the future. Maybe a few million years, but it doesn't matter. You know, humans have been around for, say, 3 million years already. We're maybe halfway through our lifespan as we are a species with male and female, both male and female. Eventually, there will only be females, as we have perceived it in the past concerning XX. But, as I said, those females, some of them will have the SRY gene. Does that mean that they will be able to reproduce with other females? The answer is no, because they look like men in every single aspect, and they'll physiologically be able to do everything that man can do except conceive. They wouldn't necessarily be able to conceive unless there is some alteration made. The X chromosome is stronger than the Y chromosome, and it could be the reason why the SRY gene is transferring onto the X chromosome is because the Y chromosome is deficient and is going out of existence. It's fizzling out, it's breaking up. So we may see eventually men who are without a Y chromosome being the dominant kind of man on the planet. It has happened, it does happen already, and although they may be the minority of men on the planet right now, in the future, genetic science teaches us that they are going to probably take over and become the majority of the men on the planet as the Y chromosome disintegrates. We might not even be on this planet by then. We might be traveling through the stars. But as the Y chromosome continues to disintegrate, its remaining 3% breaks up, then the men of the future will have no Y chromosome. This is a genetic fact. This is a scientific fact. We can't escape this. This is a reality we have to think about. We got to get our heads around if we are enlightened, conscious, educated people. And in light of the biblical verses which I've shown you throughout the show today, you shouldn't be concerned about this because it's all in according to God's plan. It's all there, addressed beforehand, thousands of years before any of this came to light to the intellectual scientific community. The Bible had already talked about it. It was all well known by then already. Now, perhaps the most difficult of all is what I'm going to bring up next. The Turin Shroud. Okay, the Turin Shroud is a shroud which is a very remarkable shroud. It has an X-ray on it. Okay, and you're like, okay, so what's wrong with a shroud with an X-ray on it? But this shroud is 2,000 years old, and it has an X-ray image on it, and it has DNA blood stains on it, and the X-ray image and the blood stains on it. You think, how is it possible to have an X-ray from 2,000 years ago? Nobody had X-ray machines in those days. Yeah, it gets even more strange than that, because the X-ray image is as if the uranium, which is used to create the X-ray blast onto the shroud itself, was inside of the bones of a person. The shroud was used to wrap up a dead body, and that body which was wrapped up in the shroud seems to have had something like uranium inside of its bone marrow, or of every bone, which caused a radiation blast to leave this imprint, this image, this X-ray image on the shroud, alongside that person's wounds. This person was a man, and this person had been crucified with a crown of thorns and a spear wound in its side, with scourge whips on the back, and also was having the pierced holes in his arms and his hands and wrists, or his wrists and his feet. 2,000 years ago, basically every single wound that you read about Jesus of Nazareth and his crucifixion is on this being, this human, on this shroud, and it absorbed the blood from this human. And so we have a genetic profile of this human. We have a genetic profile of the blood of this person. But not only that, we just don't understand how it's possible that this person was able to blast like X-rays from his body and leave an imprint on the shroud of his entire body. Very interesting. So a long time ago, in the 80s, when they thought they knew something about science, 40-something years ago, they imagined that this was because of something called a bioplast, which had built up on the shroud, and the bioplast was only 1,000 years old. They did a test of carbon dating on the bioplast, and they thought, oh, it's 1,000 years old, and so they thought that the shroud was bogus. But as science progressed, they realized, oh wait, the bioplast is 1,000 years old, and the bioplast itself took 1,000 years to build up. Tested again, they found out, oh, it's actually 2,000-year-old shroud. And the image on there is 2,000 years old, but it is an X-ray image on the shroud. Now, how is all this possible? So if you want to try and find a simple explanation of a shroud, this shroud has always been presumed to be the shroud of Jesus. It's always been presumed to be the shroud of Jesus. It was a treasure which was hunted down by the church and went left and right and all over the place because people believed this was the original shroud found in the tomb after the resurrection of Jesus. And now we know that it actually has an X-ray image on it, which is fascinating because it means that the being who was wrapped up had to produce X-rays from the insides of his bones onto this shroud. And not only that, but it matches all the wounds of Jesus, and then the DNA. We come to the DNA, which is the most fascinating aspect of the shroud. The DNA analysis of the Turin shroud has identified in this blood sample, the blood sample from the wounds on this shroud are multiple human mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, including haplogroup H, haplogroup U, haplogroup R, haplogroup L, and haplogroup M. It has many sub-branches of haplogroup H, including haplogroup H1, haplogroup H2, haplogroup H3, haplogroup H4, haplogroup H13, and haplogroup H33. It also has many subgroups of haplogroup U. It has haplogroup U2, U5. It has ROA, RZ, R8, L3C, M39, and M56. That's pretty insane, because what it means is that it has the haplogroups of more than 20-something, what we would perceive to be more than 20-something individuals from all around the planet. This is a presence of human DNA from multiple ethnic groups and geographic regions, including Europe, North Africa, East Africa, Middle East, India, all over the world. And that doesn't really make sense to anybody, because most people will only have one, all people will only have one mitochondrial DNA haplogroup. Mine is haplogroup U5, for example. People only have one mitochondrial haplogroup. You don't have 20-something mitochondrial DNA haplogroups from all over the planet. That's not possible. But that is the DNA on the shroud. But you know what's interesting furthermore is that they have done an analysis on the DNA, and they found all these very specific mitochondrial haplogroups, but they have not found any specific Y chromosome haplogroup for this man, who has a beard and has a masculine structure, and everything about him is masculine. He's a man. But they have not found any. They have found no specific Y chromosome. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, the standard narrative from the Vatican concerning this is that it has a Y chromosome, but they didn't bother to do any research on it, which is rather odd. Because if you had identified that it had a Y chromosome, then you would know which haplogroup it was. So they're saying, oh yes, it does have a Y haplogroup, but we don't know. We didn't analyze it. We didn't find out which one it was. So saying it has a Y chromosome is basically possibly as a result of simply recognizing that the imprint itself has a beard. The image has a beard, therefore it must be a man. It is a structure of a man's body. Therefore, they're saying that this is a man. It has a Y chromosome, but they have not done any research on the Y chromosome. So they just say it does, but there is no genetic data at all anywhere to show that it really does have a Y chromosome. This is very interesting. This might be a Vatican cover-up. This might be evidence of a Vatican cover-up. They say he has a Y chromosome, but they haven't done any research to prove it. There is no research to prove it. And yet, there is extensive research on the mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. Extensive. To the point that it's coming off as a very unusual genetic profile. It doesn't actually fit any human profile as we know, because people don't have that many different haplogroups of mitochondrial haplogroups. It doesn't happen. Now, one of the most famous things on claims about Jesus is that he was of a virgin birth. Now, virgin births do happen. It's called the process of when a mammal has a child with no sexual activity and no copulation, no fertilization from another uh, member of the same species. It's called parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis. It's a scientific thing. It's real. It happens a lot in lizards and snakes and fish and amphibians, but it also happens in mammals, rabbits, and various things. It can be caused to happen in any mammal, even humans. And there are cases where women have had children through parthenogenesis, and when they've done a genetic test on those women, on those children of those women, the children of those women through parthenogenesis, the genetic test shows that those children have an unusual chromosomal makeup. Most humans are going to be either XX for a woman, as we said, mostly usual, or XY for a man, as long as the SRY gene is activated. They could also be XX, XY, in the case of something called a Klinefelter mosaic, or XXXX. These things exist. There's different types of genetic signature, chromosomal signature exist among humans. Now, when a woman has a child through parthenogenesis, the child's signature is X0 and should be female because, hey, no Y chromosome, right? Oh, but wait. Do you remember the SRY gene and how it can be there on the X chromosome? So, a woman who has a child through parthenogenesis should give birth to a daughter. The genetic signature will be X0, not XX, because there wasn't a second X chromosome added to the mixture. There was no sexual copulation, there was no sexual fertilization. It was parthenogenesis. So, in those cases, the child will be X0. But if the child has an activated SRY gene, then the child will appear to be male in every single way. We talked about that today. So this is the biggest challenge for traditional believers out there. The possibility, if you want to take a genetic explanation, scientific explanation for the origins of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I'm saying this to you very open-mindedly, of course, because on this channel I promote the idea that Jesus of Nazareth was the Sar HaPanim who just appeared in the womb of Jesus, of the womb of Mary, and was born as a child and grew up amongst us. It was actually Sar HaPanim the whole time. Basically, something very alien that looked like human but wasn't actually human. Well, that would be fitting with the genetic profile of his mitochondrial DNA, and it could also fit with the fact that he appears as male, but he has no Y chromosome. Okay. But nevertheless, despite that's what I believe and that's what I promote in this channel, I want to present to you the possibility of a purely scientific explanation that Jesus was actually the result of parthenogenesis, that his genetic signature was probably going to be therefore X0, he had no Y chromosome, and that he appeared male because he had an activated SRY gene, and therefore he was a male child born of a woman through parthenogenesis. But that still doesn't explain how on earth he had such an insane number of different mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. It's very clearly that this was not normal. This was very extremely unusual. It is only possible to achieve that genetic makeup through extremely advanced genetic engineering by taking samples of DNA from many, many people, many women from around the world, different ethnic groups in different geographic regions, and then somehow taking the mitochondria from each of those DNAs and putting them inside of each cell. That's the only way it's going to happen. A genetic engineering experiment. There is just no way we know of that could actually possibly allow for that to happen, except through a genetic engineering experiment. So this could be teaching us, and we wouldn't know any of this miraculous stuff unless we had studied genetic science. So if anybody's been watching this and just says, "Oh, genetic science, schmetic science," I couldn't care less about any of that. Anyone who's been studying that will realize how important this is. And if you've not got an interest in it, then you haven't realized the significance of the miracles which are being exposed through studying genetic science. I mean, essentially, the reality of virgin birth has been exposed through the study of genetic science. The reality of the out of this world nature of Jesus's DNA and his blood has been exposed through the study of genetic science. We couldn't know this without studying genetic science. Genetic science is going to give us a solution to the extermination which is coming of the Y chromosome, which is it is actually deteriorating and falling to pieces. There's only 3% of it left, for goodness sake. And genetic science is going to give us a solution of how humans may continue after the collapse of the total, complete collapse of the Y chromosome. And meanwhile, you've got a lot of people out there making a fuss that there are only two genders, biological male and biological female, and that's it. And they feel extremely threatened about knowledge, even though the Bible talked about this a very long time ago. The future of the human species is unknown. But if we take the Bible very, very seriously, and Judaism as a whole, as I said, we've got the 6 definitions of gender given in the Talmud. Okay, if we take it very seriously, we can understand that this book and this revelation from Mount Sinai in general, because the Talmud comes from the Oral Torah, which is also revealed at Mount Sinai, that this revelation from Mount Sinai was beyond any level of human scientific knowledge before the 21st century. Okay, the 21st century scientific knowledge we have now is the level of knowledge you need in order to be able to make sense of these passages from the Bible. Okay, I'm going to invite there's a moron here who thinks he knows something about genetic science and just made a comment. I'm going to invite that person to come in. I challenge you to come into the studio. If you think you know something, KZ, here's my invitation. Click on the link and pop in. You will be dismayed. Okay? So when you see something like this, none of the words you said so far about regarding genetics have been correct. Okay, this is absolute nonsense from somebody who's desperate to hold on to an old world view because they don't know how to deal with the challenges presented to them by the present scientific studies. Okay, we have in contrast to that KZ. Oh, look at that! What a coward! No mic, mate. Sorry. It means I'm afraid, and you're going to trash me, so I'm not going to come in. As if you don't have a mic. Everybody's got a pair of headphones somewhere in the household. Okay, so we'll just ignore that person. But I put the challenge out there because I know that they come along, they throw their stones, and they don't have a clue. So sorry, mate, KZ, you're the one who doesn't know. Sorry, I have to pick on these people. They're challenged because their worldview is upset. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to respond. They're living in their own little Christian nationalist far-right little universe, and they don't know how to deal with scientific information. Meanwhile, we have other information, God bless you, from Conspiranoia Digital, WTF. I was just reading about the Turin Shroud. Wow, what a coincidence. Well, there you go. This is how the library angel works, if you like. So the library angel is definitely at work there. Look, the point is, we have this situation. We have to learn how to deal with this. The Bible has prepared us for this, and we know about the born eunuchs. We know about the promises made to them. We know about the different genders, that those people who are going to have a place in the world to come are people who are going to be asexual. And so you shouldn't be concerned about this. And you're only going to get that place if you're going to keep a holy Sabbath the way Isaiah describes it. And that is also described in the whole Bible. Basically, an asexual Sabbath keeping activity. And then it doesn't matter what you are through the rest of the week. If you can come together and have an asexual Sabbath, then God is going to be very happy with you. And we've got to work together to find out what the solution is. People are afraid of what is happening concerning the emergence of these intersex people. They think that this is a new thing. It's not new, but the discussions, all the different types of intersex, it's very confusing for a lot of people, where in fact there's nothing to be afraid of at all. And in fact, it might be the way that humans are evolving for the future, because the Y chromosome is collapsing. Perhaps the SRY gene is going to be permanently located on the X chromosome in the future. That doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be any possibility of of impregnation happening between an SRYXX male and an XX female. But we may come to the point in the future where we can, through genetic science and research, find a solution to this and continue the emergent or the reproduction so that humans continue in the future. So I think we've got to be very, very open-minded about this. We've got to be very, very open-minded about this. And clearly the Bible has no problem with gender male, gender female, and everything else in between, designated in biblical languages as born eunuchs. As I said, the other phrases which we use in the Talmud, besides just androgynous, is Eilonit, Esh, Esha, Saris, Saris Chama, Saris Abdam, and Tumtum. Okay, and Tumtum covers everything. These are the terms we use to describe all these different ones. Okay, now there's a question there from Conspiranoia Digital asking, am I talking about Chapel syndrome? I don't know if that's one of the syndromes I've been talking about, because I'm not an expert in these fields. I'm an expert in religious studies, and specifically religions in late antiquity. That's my specific field. But I think it's very important that we look into this and think about it, discuss it with an open mind, with biblical references, with Talmudic references, and with intersex people, so that we can understand where are we going as a species. Because I think things are going in a way which is going to make all of this come true. There would also be a very negative interpretation of this as well, but there's also a very positive interpretation of this. We don't know how it's going to be, how it's going to go. It can be done in an evil way, or it can be done in a good way. But we need to be aware that this is nothing to be afraid of. This is nothing to be repulsed by. This is something which God has planned from a very, very long time ago. Already the Y chromosome is 97% decayed. Okay, it's falling to pieces already at 97%. It's gone. 97% of the Y chromosome has gone. Only 3% is in existence today. Go and research these things. You'll find it out. Everything I've said is to be true. Everything I've said is to be true and accurate. All you have to do is just pause the video, Google the phrase I've said, and you'll find the information on it in some scientific article or another. So don't live in ignorance. Inform yourself, and don't think that the Bible is afraid. Don't think the Bible is afraid, although to be a religious person, you have to be afraid. A religious person should be aware of these small comments mentioned in the Bible, especially, Isaiah's comment about the eunuchs. There's a very interesting comment from Isaiah, basically meaning that the eunuchs will be there in heaven before everybody else. They all have the right attitude. And this toxic masculinity is something we have to deal with. There is good masculinity and there is toxic masculinity. Good masculinity was exhibited by Jesus of Nazareth, who may have just simply been an X0 SRY male with no Y chromosome. Could have been. And another example of this good masculinity was Paul, who was possibly also another born eunuch, as we talked about earlier. But then there's also toxic masculinity, which is really only good for slapping down idiots when they pop along, like this one, who think they know something when they don't. You just need it to do a certain job in order to herd people to a particular way. We behave like dogs, herding the sheep into the sheepfold with a shepherd. But in the future, probably there's no need for that at all. That toxic masculinity has to go out of the window completely. It served its purpose, it got us to a certain location, and there's no need for it anymore. So we should try to think about the good masculinity that is there. Now let's have a look and see. Let's see, there's a question here, interesting question. If you want to come in, Conspiranoia, you can click on that StreamYard link and you can come and join me in the studio and we can talk, because I like your questions. Conspiranoia says, isn't it assumed that women are more spiritually elevated since they were made from man and not from the ground? Well, what we do know in Judaism is that that woman was the if you like, the cherry on the cake after the icing. You had the perfect cake, the decorations, everything's done, and the final creation of all, like the pinnacle of creation is woman. That is the Judaic teaching. That's the New Test. That's the Old Testament teaching. That the ultimate conclusion of all the creation was woman. So that is that there is something in that. And as for whether women are more spiritually elevated because they were from man, not from the ground, we'll say that they were the ones who were entrusted with bringing up our children and instilling Judaism into our children. And that's why Judaism, if you have had no education in Judaism, and you didn't have a Jewish father, but you had a Jewish mother who brought you up, we say, well, that makes you Jewish because you will get that from your mother. But if you were brought up by a Jewish father without a Jewish mother, then we'll say, well, you're not Jewish because you wouldn't have had the same level of, I suppose, spiritual nutrition because your mother would have been a non-Jewish mother, so you wouldn't have had that Jewish nutrition. So certainly in the case of Judaism, that is kind of true. That's okay. He says, I would, but my talked English is awful because I'm a Spaniard. Well, God bless you. You're welcome to send me an email, of course, redjudaism@gmail.com, and we can have a chat offline. Or you can come onto the studio and we can chat after I've gone offline. If anybody wants to ask questions, you can click on that StreamYard link, this one here. And I often put it up and allow people to pop into the studio after the broadcast is finished, so we can have a chat offline if you want to. So no problem. You're welcome. So you can do that. I have finished saying what I've got to say for now, and I'm going to go offline. So if any of you want to click on that, you can pop into the studio, and I'll be hanging around for just about 10 minutes to see if there is anybody who wants to pop in and have a discussion privately after the broadcast. I hope you found it interesting. Challenging, certainly, but I think it's something which we need to be aware of, and we need to start thinking about exactly where our faith lies in all of that. Now we have Talmid Hibrans has popped into the studio, and I guess that means Talmid Hibrans wants to go. Oh, wait a second, it's Menachem Mendel. Okay, so we will have our chat, and I'll look forward to chatting with you after we've gone offline. God bless you all. Take care. Oh, and shalom.